Rockland Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for September 15th. Notice is hereby given that a virtual remote continuation public hearing will be held at 7:30 p.m. on September 15th, 2020 on the petition filed under Chapter 40B, comprehensive permit by Stingle Milk LLC, CO 41st Street, Bridgewater, Mass. To allow the construction of 236 units of residential housing. The project within two 5-story buildings on approximately 29.33 acres of land located at 0 Pond Street and 152 Wilson Street, the site.
Yes.
The application is proposing 25% of the units to be classified as affordable as per Mass General Law, Chapter 40B. The site is located on 0 Pond Street, Lot 13, Map 9, and 152 Wilson Street, Lot 68, Map 10. A copy of this application is available upon request electronically from the town clerk's office at 781-871-1874, extension 1, or ZBA Board of Appeals at 781-871-1874, extension 1195. This meeting will only be held virtually and not in person.
All set?
Yep,
Mr. Baker, I appreciate it. Well done. Thank you, sir.
no problem.
All right, I need a motion to open the meeting.
Make a motion to open.
I need a second.
Second.
I got a second. I need a roll call. I'm going to do it in order for which I find you guys on my phone here. Mr. Tanzi,
Here.
Mr. Baker,
Yes,
Mr. Haynes,
Yes.
and remind me, Mr. Hessian, are you voting on this?
No, I've recused.
Okay. So we got all four. Motion approved. Here we go. All right. I'm still waiting on my computer here, but I'm looking to just to see who's here at this point. Do we have representation? Is Tony or Mr. Attorney Galvin here?
I'm here, and I believe Tony's also here.
Thank you, gentlemen, for showing up. I appreciate that. Where did we leave off?
My memory is that we had heard an initial presentation from the applicant. We had some peer review comments. There's been revisions to the plan, and then there's been further peer review with an architectural peer review consultant that was engaged by the town. And I think we are expecting maybe an update from the applicant concerning the project. Probably then need to go hear from our, see if the board has any questions regarding that. Then we need to hear from our design review consultant. I think maybe Ms. Barrett has a few things to say, and we should also hear from Pat Brennan.
Who's here representing the applicant?
This is David Andronico from Jones Street Residential. We're representing, partnered with Rick Lincoln.
David, thank you. I had to scroll through to find you. I appreciate you showing up.
Mr.
Chairman, Mr. Chairman, this is Attorney Walter Marioni. I'm here as well. Mr. Lincoln is not available this evening.
Okay.
So we are going to take the ball and run. And really what I mean by we is Mr. Andronico is going to take the ball and run.
All right, Mr. Andronico, did you guys get a copy of the architectural peer review?
I have not yet seen that unless it was sent recently. And I imagine it would have been in response to the package that we submitted that was dated 9/4. So that would have been the package I imagine that they would have been reviewing.
Okay, Judy, are you on this call also?
Indeed, I
can't
am.
hear you. Oh, there you are.
Indeed, I
There you
am.
are.
Yep,
All
sorry.
right, I'm scrolling through trying to find, I only got 4 people on my phone here.
I understand.
Do you have Mr. Andronico's email? Is there a way that you can, because I know you were emailing us back and forth. Is there any chance you can email that over? He's saying he didn't get it.
He did get what?
The
The
architectural peer review.
I don't know. I can.
This is Cliff Palmer. I'm the peer reviewer. My peer review was not, my peer reviewed letter was dated September 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not reviewing the drawings that are dated September 4th. I have looked at those, but I haven't issued any new comments since then.
Okay, so can we agree that right now, any peer review that did come out is kind of premature and we should wait until?
I wouldn't say that because I did review the current drawings, and from a design perspective, a lot of the fundamental issues I haven't really been addressed.
Okay. So they haven't even received the original, and David, so you haven't received what we're talking about right now. You haven't received that. Is that correct?
I have not seen that, no.
Okay.
If we can get Dave's email address, I'll forward to him the letter right now, and I'll copy Attorney Marioni.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm looking, I mean, I also have it here. I mean, I can send it. I've tried to send all this information out. It's really difficult to know who's getting what.
Absolutely understood at this point. Do you have, David, do you have an issue stating your email address over the line, online, or?
I've got it. I've got it.
You should have it. We've corresponded before. If you don't, I can shoot you a note right now if it's easy for you to find it.
No, I've got
If
it.
you can-
Judy, I believe it's posted online too.
No, I have the email address. Just a minute. So what I do in a case like this is I send everything to the applicant's attorney. That's how I've been sending information to the applicant. So.
I have not seen that peer review letter.
Well, I did send it. I forwarded it. So I'm not sure why people aren't getting things. I almost wish there was a way for us to just use the town website to post everything and assume that people will go there and find it, because there really is a problem with communication here. I'm trying to get things out.
Yeah, that's fine. If we can post it on the website, we'd be happy to
Yeah,
check
I
it on a
can't speak
regular
for the-
basis. Whatever
I
works
can't-
for you guys is fine.
I can't speak for the town's ability to do that.
Okay, well, if that's what the town would like to do, if they are able to do it, it certainly works fine for us.
Is Gino online? Sometimes Gino does, he gets on these calls. I don't know if he's here or
I didn't
not.
even write a name because I was just trying to get on it.
No, I don't see him at this point. Oh, actually, no, Gino, I do see you on there.
What was that? I'm sorry.
Hey, Gino, how you doing?
Just doing well.
We're trying to figure out a way that we can get all this documentation posted on the website to make it simple.
It's on the website, Rob.
It is on the website.
It is already on the website.
If you go on the Zoning Board of Appeals page, there's a left-hand nav bar, and the major projects are listed. And within the major projects, the documentation is uploaded.
Great.
Judy, I just received your email. Thank you. So I'll
Okay.
share that with my team. I don't suspect that everyone wants to wait while I read this moment. But we certainly will read this and address it. I think we certainly have plenty to talk about aside from the architectural review. So I don't think by any means this would be a wasted.
Well, I think Cliff is going to want to speak tonight anyway, but why don't we go ahead and start at least with an update from the applicant?
Okay, let's start with an update from the applicant. Applicant, how would you like to proceed, Dave?
Well, I assume, or I hope that everyone received the revised package dated September 4th. I included in that package a matrix which included all of the comments that we received during the last ZBA hearing, during the actual hearing itself. It also included all of the written comments that we received from town departments and Pat Brennan as well. And you'll see on that matrix there was a comment column and a response column. And that response column either gave a response in narrative form or it directed to a section or a page in the revised package. So I thought I guess the way that I kind of saw this going was we would, you know, I assume you would have had some time to review that revised package, see what we've addressed and what we didn't address, and then we could kind of field any additional questions that you would have based on your review.
There's only
We've
one
made
problem.
yeah.
If I may, Rob. The narrative.
All right, we got a lot of background noise going on here. What's
And people need to mute.
all right? A little quiet, a little more quiet there.
I don't know
All
if you saw, Rob, but the narrative that he's talking about,
Yes.
you need a super duper magnifying glass to read it.
Yeah, so I included that narrative in the hard copies as a courtesy, but the fact of the matter is we submitted this electronically as was required of us. So it's really meant to be read as a PDF document. And I guess our hope was that you would be able to read it electronically, which is much easier to read. It's a large document, and based on the limitations to the current printing ability, being is that most of us are all working from home and don't have access to large format printers, I added that as a courtesy. But the revised package includes all of the additional documentation and amendments to the plan that were requested. So I would say that it is still a reviewable package. That summary sheet was put there as a courtesy just to help guide you through the package.
Well, it would have been nice.
Not that the electronic version is probably the easiest to read.
The thing is, it would have been nice if it said on here to go into the packet instead of just looking at this.
I'm not sure if I follow.
This paper that we can't read, because you can't see it. The print's too small.
Well, but all of the material that was submitted in the revised package is meant to be reviewed. It's not a regurgitation of what you had already read. Everything in that package has been changed or amended per the comments that you made previously. So it was nothing more than a cover sheet to the package. The document to be reviewed is not just that summary. That's just a guide.
Mr. Baker, what's your major issue? Just because because you can't read it? I mean, believe me, I understand. I understand what you're saying. Is that the major
Well,
issue?
it has comments from the highway department,
Mm-hmm.
and they made comments, but you can't read what it says. Unless there's something else somewhere in this whole packet that is better print that you can read, you can't make sense of this paper.
I'll refer you to the fact that this was submitted electronically too, as was required from us.
Rob, can I make a suggestion rather than arguing about whether the font is too big or too small? Why don't we have Mr. Andronico kind of summarize what he submitted and catch us up to speed?
All right, my computer's back to normal here, so I can see everybody. Mr. Andronico, please, if you can accommodate, can you summarize what we're talking about, please?
Well, I guess the best way that I could do that is really just read the exhibits off of what was submitted in the package. Unless you want me to read, there's upwards of 100 comments here. Unless you wanted me to read every comment and then read our response off of that matrix, I'm not sure that I can necessarily summarize.
No, I agree with you, sir. In the end, we're gonna have to read these. I'm gonna have to read these into the record anyway, and I'm pushing this off until the end because I don't think everybody needs to hear this. If there's a way to paraphrase this, basically.
Rob, can I make a suggestion, please?
Absolutely, Mr. Galvin, absolutely.
I think it's completely unnecessary to read every comment and every response into the record. They're on file with the town. We don't have to do that. I think having an overview of what has changed without all of the specifics is completely adequate for right at the moment. And if we've got questions and we want to get into the details after we get an overview of what's changed, I think that would be extremely helpful to everybody.
Mr. Andra,
All
Mr.
right, so
Andronico, does that work?
I'll do my very best. So I'll touch on some of the kind of the larger points, and I think some of the larger concerns that all of you expressed last time. We'll start with kind of the soil import. I know that everyone was a little bit concerned about the amount of soil being imported onto the site. We've made some changes to our civil design. And we've brought the cubic yards to be imported down from 72,800 cubic yards to 64,594 cubic yards, which doesn't sound like that much, but in the context, it's pretty significant, and we're actually pretty happy with that number. I mean, we benefit from bringing that number down as well. Additionally, there were some comments and concerns about parking and also outdoor space. We've added, we've increased the number of parking spaces from 292 to 309 parking spaces. Additionally, we've added, in essence, a park, which would be over kind of on the Wilson Street side of the site, which is a designated green open space area with trees, and we anticipate picnic benches, an area for folks to kind of enjoy some outdoor space. We've made some changes to the parking as well to accommodate some additional ease of access for fire department and also traffic in general, and find those additional spaces. And then lastly, we think we've addressed some concerns with, there was a question of whether the fill being brought in onto the site would be contaminated, or how will we confirm that? And we've included a soil management plan, which we are proposing. In essence, it would be a very specific, would outline very specific requirements to the nature of the soil that we would bring into the site, which would include testing and reports, which would be required of us from anyone importing material onto the site. That is included in the package. A pretty detailed summary of that plan, although that plan has not been completely developed. This is a pretty good representation of the level of criteria that we'd be requiring for that fill to be brought in. Additionally, there were some questions about contamination of the water supply and runoff. We've made some, we've included some responses and some changes to the engineering plans to address those concerns, and to specifically address those concerns, not just general. We answered every single one of Pat Brennan's comments, and I know that he was spending some time reviewing it. So hopefully we answered them with enough detail to be satisfactory. And then I would say another note is there was also some question and concern about the drive access road from Pond Street and its impact on the abutters. We included a rendering which would show the view from the abutters to the roadway, which includes some plantings, pine trees, a sloped area, vegetation, which we think is a pretty accurate representation of what that view will be. And we do genuinely think that it would be acceptable to the abutters and to anyone else concerned. Additionally, I would say that we also eliminated 250 feet of retaining wall along that driveway as well, which we know that everyone was concerned on the height of that and how it would look. So we eliminated as much as possible, as well as eliminating quite a bit of retaining wall around the site as a whole, in an effort to obviously minimize impact on the surrounding wetlands and minimize the visual impact for the surrounding neighbors. So hopefully that's a good enough kind of catch-all summary of the things that we tried to focus on. And then naturally, there are some very specific technical details that Mr. Brennan pointed out that we feel we addressed as well, but that would probably probably not be the time to address those specifically.
Pat, have you had an opportunity to review everything?
Yeah, I've looked at the majority of the information that they sent over. I haven't had a chance to put anything in writing as of yet. I will say that the drainage design I'm comfortable with at this time.
Okay.
I do still have some outstanding comments that I will put in writing back to through the board to the applicant so that we can get those items addressed. But you know, my main concern is on these projects is typically the drainage, and I am comfortable with that design at this point in time. So it's some other issues now, retaining walls, proximity to wetlands, and that type of thing still. You know, the wetland issue, I don't know what they can do about it, but the retaining walls in some areas are right up to within a foot of the wetland, almost right on the wetland line. So it's really maximizing the useful area of the site with the retaining walls. Is, you know, they're just trying to max out what they can get, so they're right up to the wetland lines in a lot of the areas. So
No, that's understood. That kind of brings up one other point. We talked about this at the last meeting. We are going to have to administer, I guess, our local wetland bylaw. I had a question. A lot of times, you know, they ask, you know, where are you going to be, basically where you're not going to be compliant with the wetland bylaw. I guess my question is, where are you going to be compliant with our current wetland bylaw? Mr. Andronico, have you guys been able to look at that? I know this is kind of like a new thing, so normally you'd go to conservation for this, but we do have to deal with it. So is that something can you address that today, or is that something you'd like to talk about at a future time?
I'm not sure that I personally can address that. However, I do have my consultants from Ty and Bond on the line. If Patrick Crimmins or Matt Abraham, if either of you feel like you can maybe bring a little bit of detail or any kind of response to that, if you could, that'd be great. If not, we can field that later, but I'll let you guys kind of chime in on that if you feel comfortable.
Sure. So I guess one of the things that came out of the last meeting was with respect to that comment, Mr. Chairman, was you know, adding some calculations to the plan so that you could see the numbers in terms of impact. So what we have represented on the plan is, you know, we show the wetland buffer line. Obviously, pretty much the entire wetland buffer it is being impacted.
And what buffer is that? Is that a 50, 100, or a 25?
That's the 100-foot wetland buffer. So.
Okay. Because our local, the local bylaw from, again, this is the first time that we're really taking responsibility for it. It looks like it's a 25-foot no touch. Okay. So I guess my main question is, where are you going? Can you point out places that you're going to be able to comply with that? Because it looks like it looks like for the most part, you're not going to be able to comply with that at all.
Rob, maybe they could share their screen and kind of show where this area is.
Is that possible?
Yeah, I certainly can share my screen.
You need permission to do that, I think. And there we go.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So can you folks see that now?
Yes.
Great.
Reasonably.
So, you know, what I had just referenced is that 100-foot line, which is right here.
Mm-hmm.
And at what we've done is broken out, you know, the calculation within that, Mr. Chairman, which, you know, just showing the total buffer area and how much of that would be impervious surface. So, you know, to your point with the 25-foot, you know, much of this is it's being graded right up to the edge of the wetland, just given what we have for upland area out here. In fact, that was another comment that we had received, was just to show what % of the site is upland. So we even though that's not a data requirement, we did add that to the plan set here. 57.5% of that is of the site is upland. The remaining of it is this wetland area. But I you know, I don't have an exact calculation, but it's going to be pretty minimal in terms of what we are, because we, you know, just given the nature of the site, we are developing, you know, right up to the edges of the wetlands in most places. I think you can see here the building, the parking, you know, this is the stormwater management area. So, and then everything, you know, is going to be kind of sloping down towards the wetland area. So it'll be graded adjacent to it.
Mm-hmm.
How about in the area of the retaining wall, Mr. Crimmins? Are you able to show with any type of a profile plan as to how you're going to stay away from the wetland areas during construction? Maybe you can explain that.
Yeah, I mean, construction, I guess that's more of a means and methods thing, but what we did do was, one of the requests was to prepare sections along the drive at every 100 feet.
There we go. I was trying to pull that. I was trying to pull that up. Okay.
Yeah. So this is just actually to start. This is the road profile itself, just showing the grade of the road above, which you can see above existing grade here. So that's finished grade, proposed grade. You know, that location that we talked about where we eliminated about 250 feet of retaining wall is right here, which is, you know, I think probably the area that was of the biggest concern, because you do have these abutters right adjacent to that drive, whereas these abutters are all kind of set back through the wetland vegetation. So we did eliminate the walls here, but, you know, just going through those sections, we did add, you know, we did add a 50-foot one as well, just so you could give that section view from this abutter's property as well, because the 100 was up here. So just here, obviously there's no wetland in this 50-foot section. It's at the, I think it's at the 300 and the 500-foot mark that is where it really gets pinched. Again, this is the 100-foot. You can see the slope along the edge here, along this abutter's property, with vegetation up top. David mentioned that we've done some renderings to represent that. The this is the 200-foot section, so this is where we start to get close to wetlands on this edge. You can see the edge of wetland on the, we'll call it the west side of the road here. That's delineated here, so there is some, you know, scrolling in, you're looking at, you know, that's about a 6 from where the base gets excavated. It's about a 6-7 foot distance. The pinch is going to be here at the, what is this, the 300-foot station. You can see along the east side of the road. It gets to, you know, the wall is sitting here just a little over 2 feet back. This, you know, the base, which would get excavated in the gravel set, that's a 1.5 foot. So they'd have to be really careful working in this area, but it is off of the wetland. Again, the wetland line over here, it's a little bit further away. This is the 400-foot station. Again, this is about the same. You know, you're looking at, it's about 2.5 feet from the face of the wall, you know, 1.5 feet or so, 2 feet from the base of the gravels. And then similarly here, you know, it's just, we fit it and designed it such that we've avoided the wetland impact, but it is going to have to, you know, the contractor's obviously going to have to take care to build that without impacting the wetlands.
And we're very cognizant of the condition out there, and so is the contractor, who has been involved in pre-con. So we have a very keen sense of what the conditions are out here. It won't be someone coming in blind, not understanding the conditions.
All right. So is the intention to clear right up to that wetland line?
In the places that it's pinched, yeah, but where it's not, no. You can actually, we show, this is the 600-foot station, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the edge of tree line, or approximate edge of tree line here and here.
Okay.
You know, kind of the same thing. You'll see it, we'll get closer to the wetlands as it starts to get pinched, and then it's you know, much further away where we have that opportunity. So basically it's wherever we need, you know, where we don't, we're just going beyond what we need for excavation to hold that tree line.
Mm-hmm. When, what were you proposing for actual erosion control measures?
So the whole site itself will be surrounded by silt sock. Everything will be, you know, all the temporary stormwater controls will be put in place in accordance with Massachusetts DEP standards.
Mm-hmm.
But the entire perimeter of the site will have silt socks. You'll have silt sacks within catch basins when they are constructed eventually, and you'll have that construction entrance detail coming in off the site as well. There's a whole sheet in the package that's just dedicated to installation of erosion control measures for temporary stabilization. I forget what sheet it is, but
Pat, did you have a chance to look at that? Did you have a chance to see that?
The erosion control plan? Yeah.
Yeah.
I looked at that.
How do you feel?
Well, as he mentioned, it's basically installing that silt sock right along the limit of work around the perimeter. You know, it's something that will have to be monitored closely during construction, which is, you know, it's required. It'll be required by their EPA general permit, as well as any orders of conditions they receive from the Conservation Commission, because they still have to go, even though you guys are standing in for, well, provided you don't waive or you do waive the local bylaw.
Mm-hmm.
They still have to go to your Conservation Commission under the state act anyway. So they still have to file as if they would normally. It's just your board, the zoning board, has to determine whether or not you want them to comply with the local bylaw or not. They have to comply with the state standard.
No, that's absolutely, that's understood.
Which is happening. We will be submitting.
Okay. All right. Mr. Tanzi, do you have any comments on this?
Not at this point.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Matt Abraham. I also work for Tyne Bond, and I represent more of the environmental side of this project as well. So
Good
just
evening,
to-
sir. Thank you for voicing up here.
So I just wanted to kind of add, you know, echo to Pat's comments that as far as regular inspections, so we'd be, you know, required to do weekly inspections along with inspections after any significant precipitation events. So we'll be there regularly to inspect these, you know, erosion control measures to make sure that they're functioning properly.
Does anybody remember when the wetlands were actually flagged out there? Because I know on the site visit, we saw a few of them, but we didn't see all the wetlands flags that were, you know, and again, we weren't looking for this, but I'm wondering if those wetlands flags actually still exist in the field.
Yeah, I can find the note. I think we actually had included that ORAD as part of the package.
Mm-hmm.
And confirmed that the delineation in the ORAD matches what's shown in this plan set.
Question is, are they still hung in the field? Because again, you're going to be clearing right up to this, and obviously, when it comes right down to it, someone's going to have to lay out, you know, so a surveyor is going to have to lay out the limit of work line, and that's the, you know, that's basically that's going to be your erosion control line. So I'm just wondering if the actual flag line is still out in the field.
You know, much of it from what I could see when I was out there was out there, but I guess we'd have to confirm because there has been some I don't know why it would be touched because we're not impacting the wetlands, but I guess it would need to be, it was,
It's also been a while ago. It was also a while ago that the flags were actually hung.
right. So that's
Yeah.
what I'm showing here is they were done in May and I think amended through the ORAD process in September of 2018.
Yeah, so that's a few years ago. There's a good possibility that some of them have deteriorated and fallen off, and I'm just thinking that maybe this should be, especially if you're going to the Conservation Commission again, and it's, I don't know, you may want to make sure that those flags are still up there, at least through the life of the project.
Yeah, I mean, we'd be happy, you know, if you wanted to stipulate that too, that, you know, that they be confirmed and maintained.
Okay. All right. Where else are we? I did have one other question on the profiles. Very good job on the profiles. Thank you for doing that. What's the height of the, basically how high is the pavement going to be above neighboring grades? I saw roughly anywhere from 7 to 8 feet above, the neighboring properties out on Wilson, and then the rest of it's wetlands, and I don't think anybody's really even going to see it. But I guess the big question is, from the houses that are actually going to see vehicles traveling down this roadway, how high are these cars going to be above the natural grade that, you know, is there currently?
So you're talking about mainly at the beginning of that roadway from Pond Street?
Exactly.
It might be a good time to pull up the rendering, and actually, Pat, if you wanted to relinquish control, unless you have it right there, I can certainly pull up mine. So if you give me just one quick. Yeah, okay, let me just pull it up real quick, and I think that gives a pretty good representation of what that might look like. It's just loading. It's a big image. So bear with me as I get this to cooperate, okay? And then we'll share my screen, and just let me know when you folks can see it.
There we go.
Okay, so this is the kind of rendering that we created, and what you can say, and this picture was taken right down on that roadway, so the abutters are right behind us here. You can see that sloped area and the vegetation, and then that dotted line, which is basically the roadway, and you can see where we've transposed a vehicle. So that, I think, is a pretty good visual representation of what that might look like, keeping in mind that the intention is to vegetate this as thickly as possible. So hopefully that helps answer that question a little bit.
All right. So again, proposed screen, you are proposing a good amount of screening as it goes down the entry roadway like that, on the side of the abutters. So again, just so we can limit the amount of visual impact that they're going to have to bear.
Without a doubt, and that's important to us. We want to be good neighbors. You know, our reputation in this neighborhood is important to us. We want people to come rent here. We don't want to be the big bad in the neighborhood. So this is an important detail with us, and we will spend time making it right, as we have.
All right, that answers that. Where else do you want to go, Mr. Andronico?
I would say, I mean, I would say I would leave it, you know, open to the floor to, you know, if there are any specific questions, concerns that people want to talk about, we can certainly go to a section in the package that we feel addresses it. Aside from that kind of opening summary, if there's any detail that anybody wants on any of that, we can dig into whatever you guys want to dig into. We think that we've done a really good job. We worked very hard to make sure that we addressed everyone's comments and concerns. So we hope that we've done that here, and we're willing and prepared to talk in detail about any specific aspect that you guys would like to.
All right, what I'd like to do is I'd like to bring it to the board. I'm going to start with the first one in my line, Mr. Baker. Gonna go your way. What do you have to say, sir?
Have you readdressed the issue with the fire department about the sweep path in the hydrant location?
So that comment that was issued, unfortunately, was a comment on the previous package. So we have not seen comments from them on this revised package, and we have made some amendments to that plan. So I don't want to say, I don't want to use the term pointless, but we would be commenting on a comment on a plan that no longer exists. So I think what we would need to do is get their input on this revised plan in order to respond with anything meaningful.
What about the letter from the sewer department? Have you reached out to them? It's probably based on the older plans from their letter.
Yeah. So all of the comments that I think are included in the matrix that I sent and then you will receive were on the previous plan. So this plan now dated 9/4 should address all of those comments. And we have had discussions with the sewer commission since then as well, but I don't believe we've received any official comments on this 9/4 package.
Okay. All right.
But we believe we've addressed the comments from the previous package in this revision.
Have you retouched bases with the highway superintendent about Pond Street?
Again, we believe we've addressed their comments in our road improvements plan. And we responded to the comments that they made previously. So we await further comments on this revised package.
Right.
But we left no stone unturned. We very intentionally addressed every single comment that we received either during the last hearing or written form. We paid very careful attention to addressing everyone's comments, even if it was redundant. And I don't mean that in a negative term. Just, you know, sometimes people have the same interest.
Understood. Mr. Baker, you got anything else?
Nope. Do you have a copy of the letter that was sent to us for September 15th from a Mrs. Hoffman?
I do not have that on me. I'm assuming that you have it on you?
Yes, I do.
Would you like to read that, sir?
You want to wait till, or we want to do it now?
Well, I guess if you think that you wouldn't have brought it up if you didn't think it had some bearing on this, so.
Dated September 15th, 2020, single mill from Virginia A. Hoffman, 66 Colby Street. I continue the question as I have written in previous letters how 152 Wilson Street can be included in the single mill business when town meeting voted decisively that it remain residential. But I have a much greater concern, and that is about increasing the traffic entering Pond Street by 400 residential cars, visitors and delivery trucks, traffic in such a very sensitive area of Pond Street. The single mill entrance is 0.2 miles from the intersection of Pond and Hingham Street. It is also diagonally across the street from Longwater Drive in the business of Assinippie Park. This road, besides the businesses, handles much traffic as an access from Hanover to Route 3, as does Pond Street. There are times during the day at present, without further occurring of traffic, when traffic is snarled through Longwater Drive and Pond Street to get onto Hingham Street. Of greater concern still is when traffic cannot get onto Pond Street and backs up to the southbound exit ramp of Route 3. There are already many accidents at the Home Depot light and the Pond Street light. Please think about the impact to this area in the neighborhood that would be endeavoring funneling in the midst of this situation, the additional volume of traffic you are considering. Thank you, Virginia A. Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Mr. Andronico, can we just, can we relive the traffic impact? Do you have any way that we can talk about this just real quick?
I would prefer to address that. We have a traffic study that we've done, and we did that in conjunction with some prior traffic studies that had done, I think, on a previous project that the town provided to us. So I would, rather than give a speech on traffic studies, which I'm not qualified to do, I would rather refer you to a document. So what I can do is follow up with that traffic study and present that to the board as a supplement to the package submitted on the 4th, if that seems appropriate.
That seems appropriate. Mr. Brennan, can you, can we talk about this? We went to Gillen, didn't we?
Yeah, we did have Gillen Associates perform a traffic peer review that was dated July 27th. If Mr. Andronico doesn't have that, I can forward that to him. But there's some questions that Mr. Gillen has raised in his peer review that I think requires some response from Mr. Andronico's traffic consultant.
Yeah, and we are in the process of that now. So I do have that report. So
Okay.
I think that would probably just be the best way to address that comment and that concern.
All right, so we have to look at everybody basically has to look at it and address it at a future date. It's fine. Mr.
That's
Baker.
all I had, Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. I appreciate that. Who's next in line? Mr. Tanzi, where are you? Mr. Tanzi.
Right here. Yeah, my concerns are primarily with respect to safety. Mr. Baker had touched upon the sweep radiuses of emergency vehicles, and that has been a concern of mine. That has been a concern of the fire chief, and as you had explained, you're not aware if the fire department has reviewed the latest submittal. But it appears by this submittal, you are still requesting a variance of 1.25 spaces per unit, where our bylaw for this type of a project would require 3 spaces per unit. 3 spaces per unit might be a little bit of an overkill. I mean, I can't speak for the board, but 1.25 spaces per unit assumes that there's only going to be 1 vehicle, per these units, with the exception of every 4th unit that there'll be an additional vehicle in there. I think this ratio, maybe 2.25, where there'd be, for the most part, two people living in a unit with 2 cars, or if one person lives alone, there's probably got to be a frequent visitor or something that's a reasonable assumption. My concern is with the long access that we have going into this site, and then a lack of adequate maneuverability for emergency vehicles. If we had 1.25 spaces per unit, and if people are double parked or somebody's, parked in one lane, and maybe the people in the units with their cars, they can skirt around a vehicle and go into the other lane temporarily and whatnot and make it work. Although that's not ideal, it would be a real safety issue for an emergency vehicle, and clearly that would not be acceptable. So I mean, I would be inclined not to go along with the 1.25 vehicle per unit. I wouldn't necessarily require you to hold you to the 3 spaces per unit, but I think 1.25 is just too aggressive, and we're asking for problems. I would also like to see a bicycle path, and this came out of this is nothing new. It's basically what was presented in the architectural report, and I do agree that access and egress, walking, a sidewalk to walk or to ride a bicycle, I think that's merited on such a project as this. The other thing is recreation. We talked about this. That's also very important. I think it'd be necessary, maybe a half basketball court, maybe a similar open space lawn area for kids to throw a baseball or a football around, or kick a soccer ball around, maybe a swing set area, that type of thing. But there should be some type of a recreational facility for, youth that's, ages from, 8 to 15, 16, something like that. And then I do have an issue with the building height. The highest amount of stories in Rockland is 4. You're up at 5. I'd like to see that capped off at 4. I don't really think this site can handle the number of units that's being proposed, just because of parking, egress, and recreation facilities. And then it's also my understanding that your traffic consultant is going to address the traffic issues raised by Gillen. And last of all, so a 21E was never formally done on this site. Is that correct? Where do we stand? I read in the report that they had found some test pits with levels that were just above the reporting levels. Can you touch upon that a bit? Where do we stand with that?
And that was for a what? I'm sorry. I couldn't get that last part.
Well, one of the reports, an environmental report, states that a number of test pits were done, and they tested for a number of chemicals, and they found a few that were above the reporting concentrations. In other words, if your contamination is above a certain concentration, you have to report it to the state. I don't know exactly what the next step or what's that's going to be required to do that. I was wondering if there's somebody on your team that might be able to just give a quick overview of where does this go from here, or what needs to be done, if any, on the site for remediation.
Sorry, is it Tansy? Is that how you pronounce your last name?
Yes.
Okay, so my name is Matt. Again, I work with Ty and Bond. I'm a senior project manager on the environmental side. So to address your point on the 21E, we did complete a full phase 1 investigation, which is, I can kind of break it down for the board. So we included it in our summary letter, but essentially what that is it's more of a research project into the history of the site, which, you look at past operations physically at the site along with the surrounding area, and you identify what's called recognized environmental conditions, RECs, And so based on that initial investigation, we suggested to Mr. Andronico that we perform what's called a phase 2 investigation. And I believe that's what you're referring to, where we completed test pits and we installed some groundwater monitoring wells at the site as well. Some of the concerns that we identified that led us to wanting to perform that investigation were, past operations as a salvage yard, that sort of thing, along with some of the, other environmental conditions that were on abutting properties. So with Mr. Andronico's permission, we completed those investigations. So we did multiple test pits across areas that we had identified as being used heavily as part of the salvage yard operations. We identified a couple areas where there were, some buried solid waste, mostly kind of just a consolidated tire burial. So part of the recommendations in our letter was to, remove those buried wastes. But actually it was whenever the exact date of decommissioning of the salvage yard operations, we weren't able to ascertain, but they actually did a really good job removing all the old debris. There's some smaller piles that, we would manage to the extent feasible. There's, evidence of former operations, some minor broken glass and some of the superficial fill. So that's why we had recommended, in areas of the original site that may not be graded, that, you import some topsoil to sort of cover up, some of those kind of incidental debris areas. In addition to just identifying the waste areas, we also completed several rounds of testing along, various different contaminants. I don't know how deep you want me to get into the actual analytical table, but we looked for anything from petroleum-based compounds to PCBs to volatiles to heavy metals. We searched high and low across the gamut of parameters that we would typically look for in instances like this. I believe what you were referring to, we identified a couple of what are called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. Essentially, that's, I guess I don't know how deep you want me to go into it, but there's several sources that you can find, these contaminants from, anywhere from atmospheric deposition to, urban fill that you would find in any sort of urbanized area. Under Mass DEP regulations, there are certain exemptions that preclude you from needing to manage these, so to speak. If certain sources that you would typically identify in that urban fill, so you see coal ash remnants, things like that. The levels that we found out of the 8 test pits, we found levels in 1 of the test pits that were above, a very conservative reporting threshold. We did subsequent analysis on those samples that showed that they were related to some of those urban fill components. So they're exempt from managing under Mass DEP regulation. I don't know if that overwhelmed everybody, but
You have to remove it.
Say it again.
What you're saying is you don't have to remove it by state standard.
Correct. And that's all Mass DEP regulation. I can point to, statutes, we certainly included those in some of the summary letters that we prepared. But essentially, if you think of it from a conceptual standpoint anyway, that area of the site is under an area that the grade would be raised under, our fill management plan, which is going to set, very stringent guidelines on what type of fill we would be willing to accept at this site, both from a geotechnical standpoint, meaning it's not, you know, it's good structural fill, as well from, you know, environmental standpoint, that it's quote unquote clean. Again, all managed under Mass DEP regulations. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we're thinking. And I can certainly answer additional questions if you want me to drill down deeper into the data. I can certainly do that. I just didn't want to really overwhelm people with numbers right now.
Matt, can I ask you, Mr. Tanzi, can I just ask Matt a question real quick?
Sure.
Matt, do you have the ability to share your screen and maybe show people where on the site you're talking about? Most specifically, where the junkyard was. Or David, do you have the ability to do so?
I can, let's see, where do I go to do that? Share. Actually, let me, give me, if there's any other questions
Matt, take a couple minutes to pull that up, because Mr. Tanzi, you kind of, you gave me a lot to unpack there, and I can perhaps address some of those other comments and concerns while Matt finds that document to pull up, if that works for everyone.
I was just gonna say the same thing. I can pull up 2 or 3 images, including, you know, some of the old historical imagery, as well as a detailed site plan of where our investigation points were, so you can see the overlap.
All right. While you do that, I'll do my best to kind of remember. I jotted down your comments, Mr. Tanzi, but it seems like ages ago. Just kidding, Matt.
Sorry.
So one of the first items that you brought up was the number of parking spaces, the 3 spaces per unit. I think it was our 3.1 spaces per unit. So like I had mentioned earlier, we increased the amount of parking spaces in response to that comment because we understood it and we hear it. We based our assumptions on number of parking spaces based on the fact that the demographic that we are targeting for this particular community is mainly young professionals. And to back that up, we're not just saying that to back up the number of spaces we have. If you look at the unit spread, we have over 50% 1 bedrooms, 35% 2 bedrooms, and less than 15% studio and 3 bedrooms. So the vast majority of the units would be 1-car units. Additionally, we're going to encourage ride sharing and shuttle pickup locations on the site as well. So we really feel as though that's an appropriate number. I mean, if you look in Boston, you look at the ratios and number of spaces they require, it's far less than 3 spaces per unit. We feel like this is more than adequate based on the demographics that we're targeting. And in that revised package is an actual narrative explaining how we came upon those demographics that we're targeting, why we think this is the right community for them, how we're, and how we're marketing towards that demographic, and why we think it's an appropriate amount of spaces. We don't suspect there'll be a lot of families in this property, which also leads to the next point. You had mentioned that you wanted to see some outdoor space, and if I might share my screen again, I can point out the park that we created in response to that. So just let me know if you guys can see the screen. I'm going to pull it up right now, and I can show you where that is. Can everybody see that?
Got it.
Yes.
All right, so this is the landscaping plan, and if you see over here by Wilson Street, proportionately speaking, we think that we've created a pretty significant open lawn and tree or planted area where it's just recreational outdoor space where, kids can throw a ball, or people can have a picnic, or you can just kind of spend some time. I know you mentioned basketball courts, and we thought about that. We did, because it had been mentioned before, but given the proximity to residential houses or single-family houses, we didn't think that any of the neighbors would appreciate a basketball court in their backyard. So it was not us ignoring that request. It was a thoughtful response to it. We felt that open space and more of a lawn would be more appropriate for the feel of the neighborhood and the community itself, being as that, like I had mentioned, we're really going for more, the demographic is more young professionals, so we didn't, a playground or a basketball court just didn't seem appropriate for the site. And then to comment on your last comment there, which is the building height, all I can really say to that is, I mean, if we slice the floor off of these buildings, that would have a significant impact on the economics of this project. And I can't say that we're necessarily willing to pursue that at this point. I'm not sure what kind of an impact it might have on the abutters. We have massing plans and renderings included in the package. And I think that you'll see is that it is no more disruptive than the Home Depot. You can barely see it above the tree line, which is also why we opted to go with a gabled roof. It's a hybrid bathtub pitched gabled roof because we wanted to go for the New England residential feel, because you will see the top of the roof, but we tried to create something that was aesthetically pleasing, appropriate for the neighborhood, and would offer some masking for the mechanical equipment in terms of site masking and sound masking for the equipment that will live on top of those buildings. So we feel pretty confident in that design. We think it's going to look right. We think it's going to function right. So hopefully that answers some of your questions while Matt is pulling up his document.
David, on that note, what I'd like to do is I'd like to hear from our design review, the architectural design review. I know Cliff's standing by. Let's see. I don't see him right now, but I know you were standing by. Oh, there you are. How you doing, sir?
Good. Good.
Talk to me.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll give a little kind of overarching view to start out with. Typically, when I do reviews of proposed 40B developments, and I've done quite a few of them, I generally start on sort of the urban impact, how it fits into the neighborhood. So if you look at this, essentially the overarching goal of the 40B program is introducing more economic diversity into communities. That's kind of one of the main reasons it's there. So when I do reviews of them, I look at impact to the community is a big one, because as this proposal demonstrates, typically 40Bs are larger, denser than existing context. So it's almost always an issue about, you always want to look at impact to the community. You also generally look at connectivity to the community, because if the idea is really to integrate new households into the community, it's important to look at how well it actually is connected to it. But as importantly, kind of the third leg of the reviews that I generally do, I look carefully at the quality of life for the proposed residents of the development. And that obviously is extremely important given the desire that it is a sustainable community into the future. So you want it to be an attractive community that continues to attract residents and they take pride in it and it's well kept, et cetera. All the things that everybody lives in their own home kind of take for granted. I think the biggest issue that I've had with this development is the conscious isolation of it. And I talked about that in the letter of the fact that you, in fact, had to create a site to make it. It's accessed by a causeway, essentially, that cuts across our bridges through the wetlands to get to a site that is created through, I'm hearing now, between 60 and 70,000 cubic yards of soil. And I think the fact that it is so constrained, the fact that it is so constrained, it leaves very little opportunity for creating interesting buildings, essentially. So I think a kind of approach that everybody needs to look at as designer, and I am a designer of larger scale multi-family building, so I really understand everything that goes into designing a larger development. And you have to look at what is in fact the developable envelope of the site. And in this case, I think, as has been pointed out, certainly in the civil review, and I think you can all see it, that because the built-up area that creates the site is really pushing right up to the edges of the wetlands, then the buildings are pushed out to the edges of that line and extruded up to, in this case, to 5 stories. And essentially then to fit in all the parking that, whether the ratio is 1.25 or 2.5, it's not my, not my field of expertise, but by the time you then create the parking to support that, essentially, as I pointed out in the report, and you can see with your own eyes, the buildings are organized around a very, very large parking lot. So I think that the kind of irony is maybe from an impact to the community perspective, it kind of succeeds in a sense that it is put deep inside these wetlands, even the opportunity to connect to the local streets and existing housing is really restricted to just emergency access, and pedestrians, I think, could go through there. But the conscious effort to really isolate it it's successful in that sense, even to the degree where there isn't a sidewalk that goes on that causeway out to Pond Street. There are no bike lanes. So, and it's actually, this notion is stated very clearly, I think, although the plan was different then. This is the plan I reviewed is actually the second iteration, the May plan. It talks about the site being a destination. And I think as opposed to a small neighborhood, by contrast. So I think that the problem is with this project is it's hard to get beyond those kinds of fundamental planning issues, because as I stated in the report there, and I concur fully with Mr. Tanzi, that for a development of this size, the amount of usable outdoor space is really, really small. And I think the developer thought, and I think that was part of that destination concept, was they do have a number of amenities within the building that I think they feel maybe makes it self-sufficient, within the development itself. So to me, I'll jump right over to that quality of life for the residents. So it has a kind of quality, much like rather than going home to a neighborhood, what you're really going home to is housing, just basic housing, because of and there are examples of it very nearby. The hotel that's nearby there is kind of a similar concept. You drive up, go in the parking lot, and go to your room, because there really isn't a whole lot else to do on the site. So for me, in that sense, it does very poorly on the integration with the existing community. I understand that's by choice. It may have something to do with targeting who will live there, but there are obviously people who are totally dependent on cars because there's no accommodation made for any other mode of transportation to and from the site. So moving on to the quality of life issue, I think the renderings speak for themselves. They are very tall buildings to the top of I'm looking at, I've got, actually do have a nice big computer screen looking at the renderings. But to the top of the sloped roof, it is almost 70 feet. There are sheer walls. There's virtually no articulation of the buildings in plan or in section. And many of the strategies that architects use to bring buildings down to a scale that is more relatable to a people scale is they really do create bays and setbacks, step backs, change in plane of the main facades. And keep in mind that these are very large buildings. The largest one, I think, is 366 feet long, and up to the eave line is probably something like 55 feet straight up. So frankly, I didn't, the typical strategies for making the buildings more interesting and scalable or relatable to scale, you can't do it because there's no room on the site between the parking that totally fills up the courtyard in between the buildings and the restrictions of the wetlands on the periphery of the site. You can't do anything. So essentially, I mentioned a couple of ideas in the report that could allow you to have more open space on the site that would allow you to make the buildings more interesting and use mechanisms for breaking down the scale of the buildings. For example, you could park under. One of the buildings could be a park under building, and you are bringing in lots of soil. In some places, actually, the plans I read, unless they've changed significantly since May, there are parts of the site where there's as much as 14 feet of fill brought in. And so this could be an opportunity to develop parking under a building, which a lot of residents actually would pay more money for. And if you could take that space and then turn it into usable outdoor space, that would help. But overall, from an urban planning perspective, I think it's very clear the primary design goal was to maximize the number of units that can fit on a small and very tightly constrained site. And that creates other issues that make it really impossible to do significant articulation of the buildings because there's simply no room. There are a lot of kind of basic issues, I think, for the residents. Virtually all of the parking is head-in parking. It's aimed directly at the apartments, at the ground floor units. There are some common spaces in some of the ground floor spaces, but most of it is actually units. So people are dealing with headlight intrusion. The sidewalks are not much more than 5 feet away from the face of the building. And essentially it means that all of the residents will, on that level, will just keep their blinds closed the whole time because there are people walking outside or their cars pulling up in front of the unit. So I think from a livability perspective, certainly the ground floor units suffer from this kind of development. So, my basic suggestions within my report really require creating more flexibility in the, basically to enable you to move the buildings around. I think to the issue that has already been brought up about building height, there's a very important proportional relationship that relates to how people really do sense the scale of buildings and whether it really feels comfortable walking by those buildings. And to have a building of this height, generally you would need a much greater setback from the sidewalk than 5 feet. But once again, the the typical strategies for mitigating impact to the residents are, there are very few things to do, actually. Certainly cutting down the height of the buildings will help if it's critical to stay that close to the walkways in the site. I'd recommend a very serious diminution of the height of the buildings. That would help. There's going to be a lot of shadow impact. The height of the buildings isn't just about sensing that the buildings are big. There are also real impact within the courtyard itself. The long bar building is going to cast shadows across the courtyard for a very large percentage of the year. So essentially, I think once you get to reading my report, for those of you who have already, I typically go through these kind of bigger issues first before I dig into the actual buildings themselves. But there are some, I almost call them sort of housekeeping issues at the end of the report that have to do with accessibility. Where are the accessible units? What's the unit mix? Things that are actually code related requirements. I also, when I was reading the civil peer review, it seems pretty obvious, and I think it came up earlier tonight. You mentioned a soils management plan. I'm thinking a construction management plan in general. Other questions I had is bicycle parking, how's trash handled? This is sort of in the housekeeping part of it. I suggested and I often do in head-in parking situations, it's if you have site area to work with, the first floor can be raised off of grade. So between greater setback and raising the first floor up, it really mitigates the impact of having your apartment right on the parking lot. But I would say overall, if I were to reproportion the available open space, certainly that the change in the September 4th plan of having the little park space that actually does go into that existing neighborhood, that helps, and I think it helps make at least some accommodation of connectivity, at least pedestrian connectivity, because I do think there are going to be people here with babies and pushing baby carriages around, and they need a place to walk, and they're not going to walk out on the causeway. There isn't a walkway on the causeway, so they will be walking into the neighborhood, and recognizing that and facilitating that, I think, is a good thing. So I think, I'm sorry that the developer didn't get this letter in advance. We could have had, more meaningful conversation, but I'm certainly open for questions. I do talk about a lot of things, including sustainability. But again, I think this is a difficult project in the sense that it's kind of a different animal when the primary design driver is to really isolate it from the community as opposed to create any level of connectivity.
So if I might, I'd like to respond to some of those comments.
Before you do, I need to speak to Mr. Haynes. This is your area of expertise as a member of the board. I want to hear what you have to say, because I forwarded this to you, and again, this is not my area. So I'd like to, as a member of the board and a resident of the town, I'd like to hear what you have to say on this.
I can say simply, I concur. This from a massing point of view, but really what we're reiterating in there is there's not enough recreational space. the expectations of and Zoom is giving me some messages here. The expectations of who will occupy the apartments seems unfounded. The number of cars, by virtue of the site, is already way below what would be needed for the site. So the problems the architectural problems that are created from it are just amplified. And then of course that design brings the distance to wetlands problem for construction, and so it's just, and then as he points out in this report too, just the sheer amount of fill and the traffic that is created by bringing the fill in, potential problems, even the impact of all that fill on existing flooding in the neighborhood is not even addressed. So all those things I concur with the report. It was very well, it was just well reported.
Thank you, Mr. Hands. I do appreciate that. Mr. Andronico, I'm sorry, I did not mean to interrupt you. Please, if you can, address some of these comments.
Quite all right. So it's a little bit difficult to respond to some of this, being as that we only got this report at the beginning of this hearing. But I will say that I think what you've painted here is a pretty unfair representation of what we've designed here. And there are a lot of factors that are not being taken into consideration. You mentioned several times an intention to isolate the site. And I must say my design team is on this call, and I'm going to come to their defense here, because what I think we've done is taken a difficult site and created a project that is highly amenitized. We have fitness centers, we have package rooms, we have work from home areas, we have craft rooms, we have dog washes. We've made a considerable effort to make this a place where people will want to live. I don't think that a basketball court is going to tip the scale much. And also this review is done on preliminary, in large part, site drawings, not floor plans, not amenity plans, which frankly are not part of this ZBA review. And I don't think it's fair to make the assumptions that there's nothing to do with this property and it's maximized units. That is not the case. We've used up a lot of square footage to amenitize this property, and high-end amenities as well. I would also like to point out that you mentioned that most of the first floor units will have to put their blinds down. I would say that that is not the case. Maybe the units on the interior might want some increased privacy, but everywhere else around the entire perimeter of the site is wetlands, i.e. a natural view. So I suspect that those windows will be open and those shades will be open often. It is a little bit frustrating when we spend the first half of this meeting talking about how there's not enough parking, and in the next breath, there's too much parking. And I think that we've done a really good job of trying to find some space to offer some outdoor space for folks in an area that, frankly, there's not a lot to walk to. You mentioned bike paths and sidewalks out to Pond Street, but where would they lead to? There's nothing in this area that is walkable. And I would say that this is no different than any other neighborhood in that area. Aside from the Home Depot, I'm not sure exactly where this connectivity that you're looking for would be connected to. So that's kind of my 2 cents. I would also say that the commentary on that architectural review probably reaches far beyond the scope of an architectural review, and really wade into areas that I don't think were appropriate to be a part of that memo. So that's my response to that.
Well, I should point out, though, that I certainly did review floor plans. I reviewed complete sets. If you look at all the documents that were available by September 4th, or I'm sorry, by May 20th, I think was the date, I saw all of the floor plans. I know about the climbing wall. I know about the workspaces. I've seen the whole thing. And to your comment, so I do know the floor plans quite well, actually. And to your point about looking out in the wetlands, if you look at, I'm looking at the very current September 4th site plan, landscaping plan of the bar building that has 4 elevations, 3 of the 4 elevations have head-in parking aimed directly at the first floor units. And the L-shaped building that has 6 sides has 1, 2, 3, 5 of the 6 elevations have cars aimed right at them. So I don't really buy the argument that they're looking out on the wetlands. Most people aren't looking out on the wetlands who live in this development.
Well, there's only so much we can control in terms of the views, but I do take exception with the fact that it assumed that our goal here was to maximize the units, pack them in, and create basic housing. We made a considerable effort to make this truly a destination. That was not a message in disguise. That is truly our intention and the effort we've put forth. So I'll go on record saying we do take exception to that comment.
Well, I think he's trying to say you have made it a destination.
That's not the impression that I got. I heard basic house. In any case, I'm not here to argue. I've said I don't want to. Forgive me if I'm defending my design team who was on this call, but I know how hard they've worked and I know how hard we've worked, and I just don't. I thought some unfair comments were made, so I felt it appropriate to defend the design and the intention of this development, because I'd like to remind everyone that we are property holders. We are not planning on developing this and selling this. We will be your neighbors. We will be the neighbors of the community around this, and it is very important to us how we are perceived and how we're met by the community, as we will be a part of it. We're proposing to become a part of the community.
I guess I'd like to just jump in. It would probably, instead of getting into an argument and getting defensive, I think what you should do, like you would do with any other comments from any other peer review consultant or anybody on town staff, is it's unfortunate that you didn't have the architect's peer review memo. As you know, communication has been difficult, but now you have it. And I suggest that you and your team go through it and respond to the comments, which you can't do tonight because you just got the memo. So I don't think it's going to help the board to get your design team on and start getting into a defensive back and forth. I think what you need to do is take the comments, just as you took Pat Brennan's, just as you took any other comments from the town staff, review them and come back with revisions that you can make that address as many of those comments as possible. That's your job.
And we certainly will do that. And we're going to review those comments closely, and we'll respond with a revised package that is as detailed, as diligent as the last.
Thank you. That's what the board needs.
Wow.
While we're talking, while you have me on, I would like to hear more from the design team about using Zipcars and shared car services in lieu of parking. Wasn't well articulated, and it certainly wasn't a thorough response to the number of parking spaces and deficiency from our requirement. I just didn't understand how they were going to use shared car services and Zipcars.
I would say, yeah, to spare my design team, that's really more of an operational amenity, if you will. Pickup stations, car services, advertising for car shares, groups to be able to coordinate residents in terms of sharing. Say again?
Excuse me? What was that?
Something.
No, I heard that too.
Me too.
DUROSS. Who is that, please?
I'm mute.
Yeah, you're not muted. We heard everything you said, dude. Please mute yourself. Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. DeAndre. That was inappropriate.
It's quite all right. So that would be an operational thing. And again, this speaks to the demographics that we are targeting, and we are targeting it in more ways than marketing. We are targeting it in the design finishes that we're selecting and the amenities that we're providing. in this business, we hear more and more. I put more bike storage than parking spaces now, and we are trying to carry over that methodology into this project as well to address a challenge site, which is truly what this is. It's a challenge site, and I think we've done a fair job of dealing with those challenges, and solve a problem. So, yes, we don't know how many cars our residents are going to have. We can't say that with any kind of guarantee, but we do know what our intentions are. We do know what our targeted demographic is, and we do know some of the accommodations that we can make for people to encourage car shares and shuttle services as well.
Just
I understand that you may need more, and we'll work on trying to get you something more concrete than that. But again, I will point out that we have made a concerted effort to add parking and open space, and we were successful in both.
I had a quick question about that parking. Had you thought about assigned parking to some degree? Because I know it's going to get it is going to get difficult. It is going to get difficult because some of these one bedrooms, I don't know, you can't limit it to someone that if they come in as one person.
Don't have it coming to visit.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear either one of you.
Yeah, no, I can't either. What it comes down to is if you some of these one bedroom apartments, if you rent them to someone and then a single person, and then they decide to get married, there's a second person coming in with a second car. These are the things that I think a lot of people are getting nervous about, because the intention is, and I understand the demographic that you're trying to go for, and I appreciate that. I definitely appreciate that. It's just, you can't tell, unless you tell someone they have a specific number of cars, a specific number of parking spaces. And what happens if you rent? What happens if you rent to somebody who has two cars? It's completely possible. They could have a motorcycle and a car, and they would need two parking spaces to be able to facilitate that. Are you going to limit the number of parking spaces upon rental? Are you going to let them know how many they can have? Are you going to be able to rent more than one to a person? Are they renting a parking space along with the unit? I know it's going to get difficult. So I'm wondering if you guys have thought about that, for, going forward.
These are good questions, and the answer is yes, we've thought about it, and there are operational solutions to these problems, and different things that we can do. So if we can answer this question or quell this concern with maybe some kind of narrative or insight into how we plan to manage this operational, let us put something together. I'll deal with my operations team and come up with some kind of a narrative or formula or system in which we think that we'll be able to manage this. Because you are right, it will be difficult. I mean, it's the nature of the site. Mm-hmm. It's a challenging situation, and we're very aware of that. But to counter that point, I would also say that it would be very difficult for any site to accommodate 3 parking spaces for a one bedroom. So we're trying to find a way to balance that. So let us put our heads together, come up with what physical and operational accommodations we can make to make this work, and we'll get back to you on that.
A suggestion might be a dedicated visitor parking area. That's just again, it's something I think many people have been thinking about. But I don't know how to deal with this site. Because again, I look at it as, if you have assigned parking, it would alleviate some of this. So basically you can rent a one bedroom or a studio, but you can also rent 2 parking spaces. Something along those lines. And it's You know, there may be people that don't even have cars, that literally are dealing with Zip cars or Uber or something like that. So, you know, it's, you can't tell. You don't, you can't really tell the future right now. So, I mean, I understand the difficulty that you guys are having with the parking. I don't know. Was there any, again, I know there was a couple of other issues that Mr. Tanzi had. I know the parking was one. I know the outside amenities. We talked about we talked about the graded off area. I had one of my biggest concerns is the residents on Wilson Street. Number one, I know there's a ton of trees between the buildings and these residential houses. I'd like to know, do we have a cut sheet anywhere that shows kind of what, if anything, the residents on Wilson Street are going to see of the building? That's number one. Number two, we are still talking about 100% emergency access only down Wilson Street. I'm hoping that's still correct. Nobody's going to be trying to come around and drive and park down there to sit at the park that you guys are creating. You know, I'm getting nervous about that. Second, another thing about the park, local kids, are they going to be allowed to come on to this park? I don't know. I don't know how that would work. Because again, it would still be private property. I continue to be a little bit nervous for, again, the residents of Wilson, only because the road itself, I mean, it's like 15 feet wide. The pavement is like 15 feet wide. And I really don't want, I really can't see anybody coming down if they're going to try and access this clubhouse or the rental office that's down there. Because there's limited parking on site. These are the things that I get nervous about. Is there any way you can address any of that today?
I mean, I would say that unless you live in the neighborhood, it's more difficult than you may think to even know that Wilson Street gained you access to that site.
Oh, agreed.
Especially since it would not be a designated entrance. It would not be a marked entrance to the site in any way. Signage would bring you to that Pond Street entrance. So I would say that aside from anyone that lives in that neighborhood, no one would have any sense that there was even emergency access to the site back there. As for the park, am I going to have an armed guard standing there telling the neighborhood kids not to go in the park? No, I'm not.
I understand.
You know, so, and am I particularly concerned about them using it? No, I'm not. Am I concerned about folks parking to use the park? There's no way for me to control that. Do I suspect that it will be such a destination that people are going to load up the minivan and bring their kids to the park at Shingle Mill? I don't suspect that will happen. But I would say that it will be an unmarked entrance to the site. Not much attention would be brought to it all. And if you didn't know that Wilson could get you there, I don't think you'd ever contemplate even going down there. That's just my opinion.
All right. Let's see. What else? Let me see who else is on here. I think I saw Mr. Rubel. I don't see him now. Mr. Rubel was on here at one point. I know Brennan's here. We talked to him. Mr. Galvin, you've been a great help to me right now, you know, for this meeting. Is there anything, first and foremost, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
There you are. Do you have anything you'd like to comment on at this point?
You know, I've kind of just been listening to the board's comments about the project and listening to the dialogue, and you know, the only thing that I saw, and maybe this is substantive and maybe kind of beyond the ordinary legals thing, but when I looked at the view of the project from the Home Depot, I saw the entirety of the 5th floor and all of the roof on one of the buildings. And it's a building that's larger than the Home Depot building. And I just kind of wondered aloud to myself, is there something they could do to articulate or do something to the design of the building that would improve the aesthetic view of the building? And that was the comment. In terms of legal comments, strictly legal, you know, I just have been thinking out loud about the timing that's been involved. The project was filed on April 7th. Obviously, it was filed during the pandemic. So the time frame for the hearing process would ordinarily be 180 days, but because of the pandemic and Chapter 53 of the Acts of 2020, the time frame is told, but we're trying to continue on. And I think it does make sense at the conclusion of this meeting tonight. And obviously there's going to be another night that we should try to come up with some ideas, and perhaps Attorney Marioni and I can have an off the record discussion about, you know, concluding the public hearing process. And the last thing I would say to you, it looks like you have a lot of members of the public and they probably want to be heard, and you know, you don't want to spend all night here, but I think it does make sense to hear from the public as to where they think things are at, particularly someone that it's in a butter.
No, that's absolutely understood. This is going to be difficult, only because I'm looking at the design team. I've got most of you here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call you out. Hopefully everybody's listening, because I'm going to call your name and I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak, assuming that you want to. Aaron West, I see you sitting right there. Would you like to say something?
I'm here. I'm happy to speak. I'm here from DMS Design. We've done the architectural for the project. A lot of what you have spoken about, David has definitely addressed. There's definitely been a lot of comments. I've noticed, you know, some of the comments here on the chat. Maybe I could address some, unless somebody has specific questions. Someone asked, why would a young professional move here when there are new housing units available? Honestly, this is a much more affordable option. So if you want to make this an integrated community, you offer something that's not a single family home so that you can have a diverse community integrated. That's one reason for places like this in a community. Another comment was about, you know, being able to walkability. Well, where are you going to walk? Are you going to walk to Home Depot? If you go to Home Depot, are you going to buy a saw? Are you going to carry that home? Like, I don't really understand where you're going to go. Honestly, if you want it to be a more walkable community, then the city needs to build, you know, the city needs to fund projects that you know, it's not all on the developer to create parks and recreation and every other avenue, you know, it's also city development that needs to get involved. Someone said affordable doesn't address the question about attracting young professionals. No, but by virtue of what is in the community, we've had a lot of artists coming into the city, a lot of IT, all of the industry that is actually coming into the city of Rockland does promote young professionals coming to the city of Rockland. So by virtue of the natural influx of infrastructure, of, you know, development, of, you know, everything that all the types of businesses that are actually coming into Rockland, that is what creates the need for young professionals. It's kind of just a theme around the country. Are there any specific questions? I could go through some of the chat questions, but like anything design specific, David addressed. We really wanted to keep this as a more New England feel type of building. To have a flat roof like every other structure that's brand new, it doesn't really fit with New England. This project is really trying to fit with how the city, or how the surrounding areas really want, keeping it more traditional. And part of that with our gabled roof design is actually shielding all of the mechanical systems, a lot of noise that might come from that. It might just look like a roof, but at least it doesn't look like, a bunch of condensers on the top of a roof. It's not, it looks like a building more like a house. I don't know if there's any specific questions. I think the parking, three parking spaces per unit I've never seen 3 parking spaces per unit. I think that's insanely high, especially when you have 1-bedrooms and studios, some 2 and 3s. Yes, there are people who might have a husband and a wife, and they might each have a car, but as was brought up before, there are also those who have no cars whatsoever. And again, this is affordable structure. So we're looking to feed to create a more affordable community. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they have a car. They might do a car share, they might meet new people in the community and say, hey, you're going to the same business community. Can we share a ride? That kind of thing. I know at least in my office, and just in my architecture office, there are at least 3 people who get in a car together every day from different parts of the city and drive to the North Shore. Just one example in one office. Traffic study was conducted. Someone is saying it's a very dangerous curve. I'm not sure that this development impacts that. The design of the streets are as they are. I mean, like I said, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to field them.
I appreciate your comments on that. Thank you.
Rob, you probably want to hear from the abutters.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm trying to figure out where all the abutters are. I've got a page 2 on here. So
why don't you just take them one by one? Why don't you just take them one by one and ask specifically for abutters?
All right, let's start with the abutters here. And again, I see pretty much all the design team. I'm going to assume that everybody that's not sharing doesn't have the camera on or is on the phone is specifically in a butter at this point. So any suggestions on how we do this?
Yeah,
again,
just ask for anybody that wants to speak in favor of the project that is not a part of the project team, and then just have them say their name and address. And if 2 people speak at once, just try to identify which one's speaking. Right.
All right.
There you go.
Okay.
I will speak.
And who was that?
Lisa Manuel.
Lisa Manuel. What's your address, ma'am?
187 Pond Street. I'm on the corner of Pond and Turner Road.
Speak your mind, ma'am.
Okay. Obviously, I'm disappointed that this might be happening. A big reason is we have a water ban on. What's going to happen when there are all these young professionals moving in, using up the water? Where is it going to come from?
Is that your main comment?
Well, yes, I'm concerned for the traffic. We have no sidewalks on Pond Street from my house down, and we have people that do take the train. Yes, and then of course, all the people that will be moving in. This will become a very busy corner of town.
Again.
Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. Let me see. Let me just get back to.
I'll speak.
Who is this?
Lisa Fitzgerald, 10 Wright Street.
10 Whiting Street. How you doing, Miss?
No, 10 Wright Street.
Ken
the
Wright.
direct to Zero Pond.
Okay.
So I have a question about the entranceway and about the traffic on the curb. I'm the one that asked the question about the traffic study during a pandemic.
Okay.
So the traffic study report got pushed off again. My question is, how are you going to address Pond Street and the traffic coming through in the entranceway? This is going to become very, very difficult to get out of this neighborhood. What's the plan to address the traffic so that those of us living in these neighborhoods can actually get out of our street?
Do we want to take a list of all the issues at this point, or David, do you want to address them as they come along?
I think truthfully, well, as far as the traffic goes, my comment remains the same. As I'd like to put that report together and let the traffic study speak for itself. And just so everyone is clear, that data was taken not during this pandemic. It's a combination and a mix of data. So hopefully that at least answers that point. As for responding to the comments as we go, I think it probably makes more sense for us to field the questions. I imagine they will be in the minutes and the record and the recording of this meeting. It would be easier for us to put together thoughtful responses to these comments, just because the nature of the comments and the volume, there could be many here. And I don't think that anybody wants to stay on this call till midnight, which we very well could.
No, we don't. We definitely don't want to do that. Ms. Fitzgerald, are you satisfied with that answer at this point?
I am, but I have a question. When will the traffic report be ready?
Can we answer that at this point?
I would say that we are concluding that as we speak. So let's, I'm going to say the beginning of next week is a reasonable assumption, and I will confirm that, and I can follow up with a timeline post this hearing.
And again, obviously, we'll get that prior, but it can be presented at the continuance hearing.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'd like to speak, Mr. Rosa.
Let's see, where are we? Who am I speaking with?
I'm Patrick Ronan, Turner Road.
Mr. Ronan, how are you this evening?
I'm good. I've been listening to you all. This question is directed to you and to Mr. Andronico.
Thank you.
I happen to live in this
address, sir?
280 Turner Road.
It needs to be in this record. So.
No, that's fine. In the place, the traffic has been increasing since I've been here about 25 years. It's extremely congested. It's very busy. I can't even imagine putting any more people down here. We're jam-packed as it is. So, Mr. Andronico, that traffic study, that's hugely important to almost, you didn't have a lot of our attention before. I mean, that goes to you, Mr. Rosa, Mr. Baker, and Erin, Miss West. You have our attention now. You have all these people on all these streets pretty upset with all of this, and they weren't really paying attention. But let me tell you, they're paying attention now, all of them.
Good.
Right? So we want some representation, Mr. Rosa. You happen to be a Rockland resident as well, okay? But we don't seem to get a lot down here. But I think you awoke a sleeping giant, because this is going to have a huge life impact on all of us. And just getting out of our street in the morning sometimes is tough. And this used to be a very quiet area.
Excuse me, sir.
Imagine.
I take offense to that. I woke a sleeping giant? Excuse me.
Well, when I say not you, I mean not you personally, Mr. Rosa. I'm talking about this whole situation. I wasn't even aware of it all. I didn't know this was going on, and a lot of us didn't. We had no idea. And then all of a sudden we heard about this in the last few weeks, and there was some sort of meeting I didn't even know about. And some of the abutters, by the way, Mr. Gronico, they don't have access to the internet. So they have the right to speak, and they have a right to go to these meetings. And during the pandemic, they can't go. So they would like to have their voices heard as well, because it's having a huge impact.
I don't dispute that. The nature of these Zoom meetings is a condition that was completely out of my hands, and we did not time this to coincide with the pandemic. There's no way we could have predicted this. We've been working on this for years, and this is just the timing of the project happened to land. So I just want to make it clear that this was not a strategy. This pandemic hit us by surprise, just like it did to everyone else.
No, I know that. I didn't, the pandemic was not a strategy. I'm just saying, I didn't know this was, a lot of us weren't aware this was going on. We heard there was a supermarket that was gonna go in there at one time, Mr. Rosa. I don't know what happened to that. Again, we weren't paying attention. No, I'm very guilty. I was not paying attention. I'm paying attention now. Because this affects me, it affects all my neighbors, it affects our quality of life. It affects me just getting to work and then coming off the expressway. You're gonna need a traffic cop down there. Mr. Rosa, you happen to be a Rockland resident. Have you ever seen what the traffic's like when you come off the exit during rush hour?
Yes.
Non-pandemic?
Yes.
It's brutal.
I
Again, have they done a traffic study on that? I mean, all these things. I mean, it's going to have a pretty big impact. In Miss West, by the way, in all due respect, we're not a city, we're a town. Okay? We're not a city. We're a small town. We're one of the smaller ones around. So this is pretty large for us, especially down this end of town. All right, we're already congested as it is. So I just can't imagine how this is going to go. Good luck, Mr. Bronico, on the traffic study. And Mr. Rosa, Mr. Baker, and the rest of the board, please read it, and then please have us also get a copy of that. And do we have the right to, have an impact on that traffic study? If you're going to, what are you going to do to mitigate any problems that we may have? I'm just curious, and where we're going with this thing. And we are abutters, and I don't know what our rights are, what they may or may not be. But we need some sort of protection from the traffic if it's going to impact our neighborhoods. There'll be a lot of accidents. There already is a ton of accidents at that intersection right off Pond when it right there where it butts with Home Depot. They're going to need, one traffic light's not going to do it. In that road, I don't know how you're going to fit all those cars on that road. You're going to have to widen it, I would assume. When you got PA Landers trucks coming down there and everything. Is there anyone on the board that happens to live close to here? On the zoning board? Is there anyone that lives down this end of town?
Rob, it's like, this is, it's not up for the board to talk about where they live. They're all Rockland residents. They're all appointed by the Board of Selectmen. They're all familiar with the site. They've all been to the property.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I appreciate the point you're trying to make, Mr. Ronan, but the board members are all Rockland residents. They've been to the site. They're looking at the plans, and we're going to have a traffic review. And it's going to make some recommendations for changes in all likelihood. And then the board will have its own traffic consultant that you'll have the benefit of hearing from as well, who will tell the board what that person thinks of their plan and whether the roadway network can accommodate this. So it's a little bit premature, but your comments are certainly noted by the board.
Okay.
Understood and appreciated. I need you to understand that, sir.
No, I do.
We're all concerned about this at this point.
In all due respect, Mr. Rosa, like I said, a lot of us weren't aware of it, and then the impact it's going to have. And again, to Miss West, you please remember, we're a town. We're not a city. If you're thinking like we're the seaport, we're not. We're just a little town. And we like being a little town as well. And, you're trying to stuff something down over here. It's going to have a pretty large impact on our little town.
Mr. Rosa, the one thing that everybody has to remember is none of the comments can be personal. You can have strong feelings about a subject matter, but try not to make anything you say personal. Then that goes for everybody.
I'm not making it personal at all, Mr. Galvin. I'm just making comments and an observation. Again, we're a small town. That's why a lot of us live here. So we have pretty large impact coming our way. So my concerns are all of my neighbors' concerns. There isn't too many of us that live here that want this. Or if we're going to have it, we'd like to see some protections from the traffic. And I think the traffic, and that goes to Mr. Adronico, the traffic is what almost all of us are concerned about. And that, Mr. Rosa, please help us, because that is what's going to hurt us all, is the traffic. It's not the people. It's not what you're trying to do here. I appreciate that. It's the cars. It's the traffic that's going to impact us all.
Well,
and that's why we're all afraid.
That's absolutely understood. And again, we are waiting for it. We will be having this traffic impact study analyzed. Everything will be we're doing everything that we can at this point. So that's what you have to understand. Thank you, Mr. Ronan. I do appreciate your comments. Who's next?
Okay.
Can I speak up? My name is Barbara Brown.
Ms. Brown, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Not too bad.
Good. I live at 94 Turner Road.
Thank you.
And, you know, I agree with everything that we're saying about the traffic. That, you know, is definitely a huge concern. I think that, you know, it's something that definitely woke up our neighborhood and, you know, forced us to pay attention. But, you know, additionally, water. And, you know, we're constantly under water ban. We got calls, you know, throughout the entire summer about conserving water because there isn't enough water in the tank. So that in itself, you know, needs to be looked at. I would also, you know, we think about safety and emergency services. As it is, hospitals are overloaded. I know I took my mother to the ER one night and, you know, before the pandemic, and she spent the night in the hallway because there's just no room. So when you look at the overall infrastructure and say, okay, so we're going to have how many units, how many more people in this area that should they need emergency services would be directed to South Shore Hospital, and the hallways are full, where are we really going to put these people? And do we really have the infrastructure to support this? Not just in, you know, our corner of town that, you know, we like the small town feel, but I mean, overall, can we even do this?
David, can I ask you a question?
I was on mute. Sorry. Yes.
No, that's fine. I do have, I don't know if there was a second piece of correspondence from the water department. Do you have the correspondence dated July 30th, 2020 from the Abington Rockland Joint Waterworks?
It should. It was in the packet I sent.
Yeah, let me confirm. I believe I do, and I believe it's a part of that matrix. If you
Okay.
will allow me just a quick moment. July 30th. Yes, I have the correspondence. We loaded the commentary into the matrix and provided responses to each comment.
Okay. Mr. Brennan, did you see these?
Yes, I did. Sorry, I don't know what happened here.
No, I thought you shut your screen off because you didn't want to answer.
No, yeah, I saw the comments from the Joint Waterworks. They, you know, in Mr. Adronico's matrix, he did offer some responses, but obviously we have to wait for response from the Joint Waterworks to see. I mean, we have to satisfy them, so you know they need to look at that too.
Ms. Brown, that's about where we are when it comes to the water supply.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I appreciate your comments. Who's next?
Yes, Fred Lockhart.
Fred, what's the last name, sir?
Lockhart,
Lockhart, what's your address, sir?
42 Wilson Street.
What would you like to say, sir?
Well, I appreciate your comments you did comment about Wilson Street. And as you know, the street itself is substandard. And I'm thinking if this project get built, are the construction vehicles going to be using Wilson Street to access that property?
I'm going to answer that question right now. No.
How are they going to get on the property?
And we agree.
Okay.
They're going to build the construction access off of Pond Street. That's the very first thing that they're going to do. There is no way that any construction vehicle for any reason is going down Wilson Street. I've said this at every single meeting. It's not going to happen. It's going to be the first condition that if this does go through, that's the first condition that's going to be on there. It's end of story.
Okay, I assume that
And we are fully prepared to accommodate that. We have no plans to use Wilson and don't feel as though we need to. So that's not a difficult condition for us to meet.
Thank you, David.
That's great to hear. I really appreciate that. Yep.
You all set, Fred?
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
Who's next?
Can I ask one more question? This is Lisa Fitzgerald.
Oh, you just got in right before I.
I did. I have a question about the wetlands.
What was
I have
your
a
address one more time, just for the
Oh, I'm
record?
sorry. It's Lisa Fitzgerald, 10 Wright Street. I have a question about the road coming in off of Zero Pond Street and the wetlands and the erosion that you were talking about earlier.
Erosion control measures?
Yes, I apologize if I don't have the right words.
Oh, that's fine.
So my question is, exactly how many trucks of fill are we talking about coming down to raise this site up? And how long will that take to fill? Does anybody know?
I can answer our assumptions. I can give you some high-level assumptions at the moment. I would say that at the beginning of this project, the bulk of the import you're going to see kind of on the front end. And I would say the bulk of that import would be about 42,000 cubic yards. So we're expecting, I should caveat this with the soil management plan that we're proposing, we would be able to start inputting fill in essence immediately as soon as we received the permit to do so, which would really spread out because we can stockpile it. We have plenty of room to stockpile that fill as we go, as we receive it. But let's just say that didn't happen and we had to do it kind of all in one shot. So we'd be looking at about 50 trucks a day for about 30 days.
So considering I am the house at 10 Wright Street where you removed the wall, and the picture that you showed where the road elevation is, that's from my backyard. And even in your wetland diagram that you showed, that's all directly at my yard. And you're talking about 50 trucks a day, possibly for 30 days? That is a humongous impact to the quality of life on Wright Street at Zero Pond. It's going to be unlivable down here.
The overall construction, that is also a concern.
It's insane. For those of us that live on Wright Street and those of us that live on Curry, the amount of trucks that will come down in a 30-day period is insane.
No, it's
So
absolutely.
I guess my question is, so what, our quality of life doesn't matter anymore down here?
That's getting that's.
Personal, I apologize. I'll take it back. I apologize.
This is not a personal attack on anybody.
No, but it is on the neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like to the rest of us living down here. This is beyond frustrating, and I understand you want to be a good neighbor, and I totally understand what you're trying to do. I'm sure in the long run it will be beautiful, but the impact on this little teeny community down here is beyond. The 50 trucks a day that you want to take down, and I know we're waiting for the traffic study, I addressed that earlier, you can't even take a left from Hingham Street onto Pond Street during high traffic. It lets 2 cars in. It's insane. This needs to be looked at overall impact.
Ms. Fitzgerald, we've already talked. We already talked.
I apologize.
So let's not rehash this.
I would like to add something, and again, not to make this personal, but I just want to make sure that the folks on this call realize that I live one town over, and I take that road every single day. It's how I get to the highway. So I do genuinely understand your concerns. I do understand the condition there. I am not removed from the situation. I'm virtually a local. I am on that road every day. So I just hope that everyone understands that I do understand and appreciate the impact it will have, which is why we're taking such effort into making this traffic study concise. And also, I just want to make sure that you understand that we do understand the impact that you'll be facing for this 30-day period. It's not lost on me. It will impact me as well. So I just want to make sure that you all understand that I do genuinely understand your concerns.
So I understand that you're saying it'll impact you because you drive the streets, but you're not the 2 houses that all these trucks will come right into our backyard. on
Yes, that's
days.
correct. That's true.
So yes, I do understand that it might impact you, but nothing like it's going to impact this neighborhood.
Rob, all the questions and comments really need to go through you, and you can manage that. Okay.
Yeah, I need.
Thank you for your time. I'll stop talking.
Well, thank you, Lisa. I appreciate it. One last one for the night. I see a Nancy Columbus. She was doing the raise your hand thing through.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Ms. Is it Mrs.?
Yes, not Nancy Columbus, 60 Turner Road.
Thank you. What do you have to say, ma'am?
So it's more of a plea. I don't have a specific question. I can appreciate that Rockland has an obligation to fulfill some of the 40B requirements, and I can understand that there is that we have an obligation as a town to fulfill that. But in much to the earlier speaker, who also lives on Turner Road, this is a neighbor who I don't know, I also haven't had as much information and have not followed this from the beginning. So that's a shortcoming on my part. But what I've seen tonight from Mr. Boner, I apologize if I'm getting that name incorrect, is that we have a development of 230 apartment units. And while I understand that this might be desirable to the young professionals with 1.25 cars who would like immediate access to a fitness center and so forth, that to me doesn't sound reasonable. For most young professionals are going to be 2 cars. There's no easy access to public transportation here. We have Union Point, which if you've driven anywhere near and around Route 18 and Union Point, there are multiple housing units going up there. I don't understand who is planning on moving into one of these 230 units where there's going to be an extremely negative impact to a very small neighborhood community. Traffic is going to be impacted. From the beginning of this meeting, it sounds like wetlands are going to be really encroached upon. I mean, all of the plans that we're talking about here are in an ideal world. Those 50 trucks in 30 days, that's if everything goes right. So while I'm sorry that the Mr. Andronico and his associates take these criticisms personally, they're not meant to be. You are talking about impacting people's lives. This isn't a town meeting that we're all here with pitchforks to come after people personally. We're talking about property values. We're talking about our children who won't be able to cross the street or get off a school bus because traffic is so bad. I understand also that you want to be a better neighbor, Mr. Andronico, I believe you, and I'm sorry, I know my comments should go through you, Mr. Rosa. But there was a comment made earlier about wanting to be a good neighbor, and in that same breath, a few moments later, said that it was up to the town to build the sidewalks for these new residents that you're trying to bring into your new community. It's not your responsibility to build the sidewalks. Where would they want to go? So, and I know I'm throwing a lot out here, but this is really
I didn't make that comment.
I apologize that I heard that at some point. This is just a plea from this part of the town to take into consideration. I don't understand why 230 something units have to go there when there's not enough parking, and it really is just a really lovely apartment building on top of a giant parking lot. It's just a plea to just take people's worries and considerations into thought.
Consider it done. And it's absolutely understood. All right. Anybody want to speak in favor?
Mr. Chairman,
Who's this?
it's Donald Can.
Hey, Don, what's going on?
Donald Can, 64 Union Street. I want to speak about the park. I'm happy. One of the goals of the brand new open space recreation plan was to have parks in every neighborhood. And so looks like you have one in this neighborhood. My questions, my questions have been brought up before. A, is it adequate for the number of people in the project? And secondly, is the park going to be protected so that at some future date they may decide to put a utility building or something else where you put a conservation restriction or some other restrictions on that park land to preserve it, so we don't have to worry that some changes could be made to the open space. And then I have a question. And it seems that there's now a conflict as who can amend conservation rules. It seems to be split up between the zoning board and the conservation commission. I'm a little confused on that issue.
With the 40B application, any local bylaw is under the zoning board's purview. Anything that the applicant would have to apply for the state,
okay,
that has to go through the Conservation Commission specifically. That's just the Chapter 40B rules.
All right, thank you.
Not a problem, sir.
We continue, by the way, in all these projects to put in a absolutely vital thing in neighborhood recreation place, park, athletic things. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. I appreciate that. All right, I'm gonna suggest we start thinking about continuance date. Let's see. Kim, you around?
Yeah, let me grab the calendar real quick.
I think we
How
need to
far
start.
out do you want it?
Sorry, Kim, I apologize. What,
Sorry, how far out were they thinking of continuing? How far do we need?
Andronico, what are your thoughts?
Well, I would say what would be helpful is if we could receive comments from the board and the town departments and Mr. Brennan and Mr. Bomer in the same way that we received comments on the last package. I think what we need is comments on this package.
Okay.
So we can respond to them accordingly. So I guess I would defer back to you. How much time do you think you need to provide the commentary? So then we can in turn respond.
My gut feeling, Mr. Galvin, I'm assuming that we would need probably like 2 weeks on our end.
I would think.
Does that
I think 2 weeks on the part of our peer review consultants, then they'll probably need 2 weeks to respond. And then
Well, they may need more than that. They may need more than that, Bob, because, you know, it isn't just a response. There may be revisions involved.
Yeah.
Well, I would say, I mean, but folks have had it since the 4th. I assume they've begun their review. So it's not like we're starting from zero.
Yeah. Let's not go there.
Yeah, I would say not.
Let's say let's say that I don't want to say this is day one on this, but
Rob, I'd suggest you pick a date either the end of October, the first week of November, but you got to be careful with elections and things like that.
I know.
So
right.
Maybe like the 27th of October. I don't know if that's an available date, Kim, for the board.
So we had ones that we assigned for us already was October 6th or October 20th available, but there's something on the calendar that says early voting.
No, that's not a issue.
Okay. So October 20th.
I really actually think this matter should be on its own special night.
Yep.
If the board can accommodate it.
Yep, I agree.
It doesn't belong on the agenda when you have other matters, because those are hard enough, and this is really big enough that it.
These aren't, there's nothing on these dates, so it's completely open. October 20th, if.
Mr. Andronico, how's that date work?
Works for us.
20th, October 20th?
7:30?
Yes.
So, Rob, by when should the applicant have response to comments and any revisions or plans or stuff back to the board
Pull out my,
so that a constructive and productive meeting can happen on the 20th?
I'd like to think that there's 2 weeks.
Friday the 9th, maybe.
Right. And so let's just work backwards.
Yep. Is that enough time for the applicant, though?
That's the question. Because we're on the 16th
So-
now.
So we're saying, so I could expect comments back when, are we saying?
If we said when the original suggestion was the 9th, but if
No,
I'm just
his
thinking-
question was, when are the peer review comments going to be received by him so they can respond and/or modify the plans to get them in time for the October 20th meeting?
that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that we can get them everything by the 9th.
Well, what is everything? I mean, I'm not sure how much more Pat has to review at this point. I mean, Pat, I don't want to speak for you.
I'm waiting for the water department. And that's number one. Number two, I haven't seen anything from sewer.
Rob, I think the major issue that we're going to be dealing with the next time, and you heard it a lot from the abutters, is traffic. I mean, we're going to have a traffic report. We'll have it peer reviewed. It probably makes sense to start with that, and then the other issues which we've already started to touch on, we could then get to the other issues. So I think we should be prepared to, I mean, they're going to be done with their traffic report next week, and if we gave it to Pat and Pat got it to McMahon, who does our peer review, I mean, it's probably take him a couple of weeks back. So we would have that done by the 9th, I would think.
Yeah, actually, sorry.
I'm willing to go. I'm willing to go with that, Pat. If you agree with that, because it's also putting pressure on you too.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll have my comments, not on the traffic, but on the rest of the civil by the end of next week.
Okay.
But just so everybody knows, there is a traffic peer review already from Gill and Associates on behalf of the board that David's team is responding to, and that's what I believe David was saying we would get next week. So then Gillen would have to look at that and see if they've addressed all of his concerns. So, I think that the time frame that we're talking about for the traffic going back and forth, I think is reasonable. Not to talk for Gillen, but I don't think he's already looked at it. He's asked for the changes or for additional information from the applicant's traffic consultant. So I think, we're well underway with that. And to just so everybody knows, the traffic count data was taken in March of 2019. So it was pre-pandemic. So it's not a traffic situation that, it's not a situation where the counts were taken during the pandemic. It was before the pandemic began.
Mm-hmm. So can we agree that, I guess basically we'll get you everything? Does that make sense? The 9th?
By October 9th, and then I'm going to work at a frantic pace to get you comments. When would you like to have our responses back before the meeting on the 20th?
It would be.
That's what I thought we were saying the 9th would be.
Oh, the 9th. So you're saying you want their responses to us by the 9th?
Well, yeah. Well, I think.
We wouldn't have anything to respond to.
Right. I don't think that this is getting.
I think the next step in this process is you guys have to send me your comments so I can respond to them. So I thought that was the 9th. By the 9th, you would get us your comments. And then I would submit my responses to that by some date that was to be determined. And then we would have a hearing on the 20th.
Speaking on my review, I will have that to them by the end of next week.
All right, so that's one out.
And the traffic peer review is on the opposite schedule. We're waiting for a response from David's team on the traffic peer review.
Okay, and then Gillen needs to get that and then review that and then get comments back on that.
Correct.
Okay.
So the traffic and the civil engineering will be kind of on opposite paths, but in the same time frame. I think we can still have a substantive hearing on the 20th in that time frame with between civil and traffic. At least we should be much further along at that point.
I'm just, with me, I'm getting nervous on the 180 days. That's
Well,
my.
Yeah,
I think Bob's
Rob,
going to address that.
yeah, Rob, you don't have an issue with that because the time frame was told it's still told technically, so.
Then let's go November 4th.
That's election day. No, 3rd.
The 3rd is the election day. I mean, my concern is just, I know the peer review consultants, the people who are being paid to do this work for the board can turn around their comments, I think, pretty quickly from what I'm gathering. And I believe, I'm not going to speak for the architect, but I think he thinks that there aren't enough differences between the plans he reviewed and the ones that came in to sort of justify a whole big review. So I don't think his additional comments are going to be particularly time consuming, but I think, Rob, what's been going on in terms of trying to get comments from the town departments. And my concern is that's where the difficulty really is being able to have town staff who are already kind of stressed and don't have enough capacity to do their jobs on a daily basis, trying to get comments from them, which may in fact affect what the peer review consultants say or what you guys need to respond to. I can't guarantee that I can get those comments turned around in the next week or two. I'm going to work on it. I can't guarantee it. I think you all know how hard it was to pull all those comments together that I finally was able to send out.
Mm-hmm.
So in deference to the town staff, it takes time. It just isn't like Pat or Cliff turning around a review. It's not that easy.
No, that's understood. I believe me, I know. I mean, this is why I'm saying if we push it out until November, is that if we're not worried about time at this point, I'm worried time for the end of the hearing. I'd like to give the applicant as much time. I'd like to give the town as much time, and and I just like to give everybody as much time as humanly possible. So if that works, I'm just going through calendars here.
Rob, I think you'd be better off going to the week of the 27th and having it on like October 27th.
Yeah.
You can't do it on Tuesday, November 3rd, but you could do it on the 4th, which is a Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the two better weeks. I think we're just too compressed in that other time frame.
That's kind of why I pushed it to the first week in November. Something different that we don't usually do, on a Wednesday night. If that works for everybody.
I'm not available that night, but don't time it around me. But I have another ZBA commitment that night. I have numerous 40Bs going on right now in several communities. So Wednesdays are just generally bad for me.
No, that's understood.
I thought you were saying the 27th.
Well, that's what Bob, yeah.
Tuesday the 27th, I think, is more realistic than Tuesday the 20th.
I agree. I think the 27th, I think if I can work with the assistant town administrator on trying to get feedback from the town staff, I think we can make the 27th work in terms of my ability to get the town staff comments to you for distribution to the applicant. But the 20th is not going to work. I know it. I just know.
Okay. And then from there, I'd like to think that the applicant would have at least 2 weeks to be able to respond to these comments and still get us information a week ahead of the meeting.
Well, I just want to say on the architectural side, I did review the September documents already. So any comments that I'm going to modify on mine, I can get that to you this week even.
Okay.
So it'll be some bullet points. But to Judy's point, though, Judy, I'm mainly curious about the fire chief. Have you gotten comments from him yet? Or
Some comments came in, the ones that I forwarded to you.
okay.
That's all I have.
That's it.
Everybody's had a lot going on. I think my experience, Attorney Galvin can probably weigh in on this as well, is that all of these communities trying to sort of get beyond the pandemic, move to sort of the next new normal. It has been a real challenge for town departments, for town administrators. It has been tough. So I've not wanted to be leaning on people excessively, but I'm trying to be respectful of everybody's time, and on the other hand, recognize that the applicant also deserves, a fair and timely hearing. So,
Rob, I think the gist of what we're recommending is that we move to continue this to the 27th at 7:30. Okay, as long as you have your board members here, I think that gives them adequate time to respond to our peer review comments and give you adequate time to review what they submit in advance of the 27th. We can start with traffic. And I would also suggest that Judy, myself, Pat Brennan, Jack Gillen, and have a work session with one board member to see if we can kind of bridge the gap on some matters to make it flow a little bit better on the 27th, because I know the professionals can find some time to do that between now and then.
I would include the architect in that as well.
Yep, I agree.
Can I ask from whom I will be receiving the comments? Am I going to get one big package from you, Judy, or how should I look out for the comments?
It's going to come either from Judy or myself. Judy and myself, Bob Galvin, or Judy Barrett will send them to you.
Okay, thank you.
David, I was trying to get them all together so that I wouldn't be peppering you with a whole bunch of transmittals.
You did your best.
Pardon me?
You did your best. It wasn't that bad. I appreciate the effort, and we managed it in the end.
Yeah, okay. Can I make a suggestion, David?
Are saying yes to Allegra, including the experts. It's the #1 allergy
Someone needs to put themselves on.
There we go.
So, David, when you guys submit your next response, this is not criticism, so don't take it that way, but it might be helpful to remember that most people don't have printers that can accommodate 11 by 17 sheets. So you might want to think about trying to format your comments so that they are on 8.5 by 11 pages, just so normal people can print them out and read them. I think that was maybe part of the problem. I mean, I can print out 11 by 17 here, but not everybody can. So maybe you could just think about reformatting those pages, and then it might alleviate some of the frustration you were hearing tonight.
Sure, loud and clear. I'll make sure there's a way to accommodate that.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Judy, the reason I specifically mentioned the fire chiefs, I remember the comments that I did look at, but there were changes on this new set. I'm looking particularly at access to the south side of the bar building changed from what it was before. So if he doesn't have those new plans, he's not going to be able to comment on it.
I understand. I'm going to do everything I can to try to make sure at least police, fire, public safety, water, those folks get this stuff. I'm going to do what I can.
Terrific.
All right. I think we're good at this point. Yes, Mr. Andronico. Yes,
No, I think we've covered everything that we could cover, and I appreciate the time from the board.
Okay. I guess I need
Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Baker.
Can I make a motion to continue the hearing for single mill till October 27th?
I have a motion. I need a second.
At 7:30 PM to be conducted
7:30
remotely.
PM.
7:30 PM. Again, I have a motion. I need a second.
I'll second it.
Who was that? Gregor?
Yeah.
All right, I got a second. I need a roll call. Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Mr. Tanzi?
Yes.
And Mr. Haynes, where'd you go? There you are.
Right here. Yeah.
All right. All right, so we got 4 yeses. We're good. All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Need a second.
Roll call.
Roll call.
All right, I got a motion. I need a second.
I'll second it.
I got a second. Now I need a roll call. Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Mr. Tanzi?
Yes.
Mr. Haynes?
Yeah.